Hey guys, Jamie here from the Butch Harmon School of Golf Dubai, and today with our friends from APC we're going to give you 6 key checkpoints to help you with your swing and make sure you're getting the most out of your game. Checkpoint 1 for me is always the grip. How do you place your hands on the grip? How tight do you grip the golf club? And for me it's definitely one of the most overlooked things when it comes to the golf swing. A lot of amateurs really are looking for the big exciting things before they actually get their priorities right and get the grip in the right place. For me the keys are definitely the placement. I prefer to see the club placed in the fingers of the hand as opposed to the palm. This will give me a lot more speed, a lot more leverage in the club. When it gets a little bit palmy, people definitely find it harder to hinge the club and get it into the right position. The second thing I'm looking for is really the pressure. So I'm really trying to make sure that I grip it firmly so that I can keep hold of the golf club, but not so tight that I restrict the rest of the muscles in my body. Again, this is a key part of it because I want to feel strong and in control of the club, but I also want to feel like I can move. I never want to feel overly restricted when it comes to this setup. And for me, the final part is the positioning of it. Basically, how strong or weak is the grip going to be? So a strong grip, you'll tend to find the hands rotated to the right, pointing almost to my right shoulder or outside of that. A weak grip would be the opposite. You'll see a little more to the left, kind of pointing out to my left shoulder. My ideal will show that the V's on my hand almost point up somewhere between my neck and my right shoulder blade, and that's kind of my idea of a nice, relatively neutral grip. So when you hold the club, look at the V on your thumb and your index finger, that little crease that sits there, and have a quick eye on whereabouts it's pointing. So right shoulder is our ideal position for that setup. Our second checkpoint today is posture, and this is often overlooked simply because we want to get onto the bigger things like the backswing and how the club is delivered into the ball. But really your setup and your posture will have a huge influence on how you're going to rotate back. And for me it's definitely very, very overlooked when it comes to the average golfer. The most common thing we tend to see is that the hips don't really hinge properly, the belt line stays quite flat, and a lot of it is all coming from our own. Now whenever we see that kind of rounded look to people's backs, we know immediately they're going to struggle to rotate their spine correctly, and they're going to really end up using hands, arms, and relying far more on the timing of their golf swing. So for me, when we're in setup, what I'm really looking to do is get my hips and feel like I'm pushing the back. And I love this little drill here where I pop a club just in front of my hips, and I want to feel like I'm pushing my hips back away from me, behind my ankles. I'll feel to start with like I sink into my heels, and then from there I'm going to just soften my knees and try and find the balls of my feet. That gets me in the correct hip hinge where I can bend forward into the ball. I can then soften it up and find balance. And that really positions you in such a way that you're going to find your hips and shoulders far easier to move into that backswing. Okay, now we get more towards the exciting stuff. So this starts to work the takeaway, and this is definitely one of the fundamentals of the golf swing that I really feel can help a lot of people in their backswing and how they're eventually going to deliver the golf club. For me, the takeaway really describes the movement of the club away from the ball and probably up to about halfway or parallel to the floor when the golf club gets to that point. Now for me, the most common mistakes are definitely kind of a disconnected look to it where the arms will push away from the body, the club can get quite flat, or the face can get out of position. So what I really like to see here with guys is that when we're in this setup, we want to feel like the chest is the one that's leading this movement away. The chest supports the club. But in doing so, we don't want to ignore the hands. The hands do play a part as they begin to hinge the club up. Now my ideal position or ideal takeaway will really see the club just resting in front of the hands, and roughly speaking the club face will match your spine angle. Now there is a little bit of leeway in that. I don't mind the club getting a little bit more open or a little bit more vertical in that position, but as a rough checkpoint I would always use the spine angle and the club face as a little bit of a guideline, and that can really get you into a good takeaway position. Like I said, trying to feel like the chest takes the club away, the face pretty much matches my spine angle in that takeaway position, and from there you've really started the swing correctly and you can support the club as it goes into the top of backswing. So checkpoint 3 is turn, and that really describes the movement from that takeaway position up to the top of the backswing. And the more I teach, the more afraid I see a lot of golfers of turning. They really try and lift their arms and do a lot of the work with the shoulders and their arms, and they almost ignore their hips. So one of the feels I'll give a lot of golfers is really that they feel like once they get it past that takeaway position, they can allow a little rotation of the hips. They can allow their belt to start to turn backwards while the shoulders do too. And for me, it's really important because if you stop the hips and prevent the hips from turning into that backswing, with most golfers who are less flexible, you often see a lot of lift in the arms, where the arms will kind of start to pick up quite vertically and the club will get out of position and out of balance. Most often this leads to big chop slices. Definitely more of the drawers will tend to, if anything, overturn or turn too much into the backswing and the hands get a little bit deep. So for me, one of the key things, once we start to get past that takeaway position, so takeaway being parallel to the floor, I want to feel like my whole upper body and hips can really turn and coil into that backswing position, and that really sets you up for the delivery and possibly the most important part, impact. Okay, so our second last piece of advice is called through, and the reason I describe it as through is I want to feel from that top of backswing position that we really go through the golf ball into a nice balanced finish. And through for me describes the motion of the club passing through impact. Impact's not a stationary position, it's just a point in time. And I think a lot of golfers can often misconstrue that. So when I've made that nice takeaway from the ball, so I've used my chest to support the club, and I've turned fully up to the top of the backswing, my whole goal is to really get through the ball into my finished position. And as you can see, a nice balanced finish. I'm over my left foot, and the ball launches in the direction I want with a nice clean strike. Last but not least, our final tip of the day is rhythm. And for me, when you look at all the really great players, you always see a good rhythm. When you're taking the golf club back, you know, that key phrase of position the club in the backswing and deliver it in the follow through really can correspond to the rhythm of the swing as well. So you think of position the club in the backswing, that kind of to me would sit as the backswing is slightly slower, slightly more controlled, like you are placing something. So we're going to place the club in position on the backswing. Deliver the club really is where we apply the speed. And for me, I almost have to wait just a split second at the top. So I position the club in the backswing, it begins downwards, and then at the bottom of the swing, I really add that speed. So for me, a slightly slower backswing is great. And then from there, you can really deliver the power once you've positioned the club correctly in the backswing. A good rhythm can really help you just put the cherry on the cake when it comes to your game.